morning or good afternoon or good evening whenever you happen to be watching this. We are going to start the silence, and I'm going to read chapter 1 to you. I wanted to refresh your memory on what a dystopia is and the 9 elements of a dystopia. This document that you have is going to be helpful to you. So I would have this somewhere where you can easily access it, because we're going to be coming back to it quite often, and it's going to be something that's really helpful to us. So remember that a dystopia is an imagined state or society in which there is great suffering or injustice. Typically one that is totalitarian, meaning the government has total control or near total control or wants to have total control over the actions of the people, or it's post-apocalyptic, which is kind of like after a societal collapse. Usually those are two separate things. Occasionally it's both of those at the same time. In short, it is a bad place. And then these are some of the common elements that we talked about together the other day. Keep thinking about those common elements. When you start a dystopian novel, there are a few things that you definitely want to look for, because they're going to help you figure out what's going on. So, since we're going to start the silenced, this is specific to dystopian novels, and I want you to know about it. So, when starting a dystopian novel, look for a few different things. First, keep your eye out for terms you don't know or words you can't define. Some of you have a little cheat sheet taped into your copy of The Silenced. Some of you don't. All of you will get that cheat sheet, but I know you don't all have it yet, because we're going to figure out what some of those terms mean. So those of you who have it, you just get a head start. Lucky you. But you can use that to figure out, maybe that shows it. So we want to keep our eye out. A lot of dystopian books will sort of use words in a new way, kind of like we talked about with Harrison Bergeron, where the word handicap didn't mean what we think of when we hear someone say that. That's not what they meant. The word equality didn't mean what we think of. They meant different things. And so words will sometimes mean different things, or there will be new terms. So you're going to look for new terms or new uses of words you know. You're also going to look for those elements of society. So we're going to make this a little easier. We're going to look for rules. So I just want you to look for new terms and new uses of words you know and rules in the society. So read along, have your book out. I'm going to read chapter 1 while I'm reading, and you are reading along and listening. Look for new terms and new uses of words you know and the rules that you notice in this society. Marina hurried down the street, past the long stretch of identical home units, the winter air needling her awake. Outside the open perimeter gate, a green YTF bus sat huffing its exhaust into the chilly morning. Marina quickened her pace, trying to zipper her coat between strides. An electric bell buzzed, and the tall gate shuddered, creaked, and began to inch its way closed. She broke into a run, waving her journey permit over her head and shouting at the blank-faced Stoff in the guardhouse. "I'm here! I'm here!" He didn't stop the gate. "Hold up! I'm right here!" The thin doors of the bus closed, and its hulking frame clunked into gear. Marina sprinted the last few steps, scooted sideways through the gate, and held her permit up for the Stoff to see. He stared at her with dead eyes and waved her through. The bus braked to a stop, the doors flapped open, and Marina climbed up the thick rubber steps. She pressed her hand into the digiprint, which flashed blue. The driver let her pass, and she headed down the aisle. Sitting in the front seats to her left were a couple of nukes, newly culled kids, whose parents had recently been convicted of crimes against the state. Marina knew what a joke the cullings were. All the big legal words, inherited guilt, associative responsibility, the Filial Internment Act, were just a bunch of lies made up by the Zero Tolerance Party. It was how the ZTs made it legal to arrest anyone for anything at all. Wrong color, wrong religion, wrong ideas. There were 2 nukes this month, and Marina nodded to them as she passed. A frightened-looking girl, about 14, clutching a clear plastic book bag, nodded back. The other, an older boy, looked at Marina quickly and then stared front again. Red-headed, thin, and freckled, he looked like he was trying to act cool, but Marina noticed his foot tapping nervously beneath the seat in front of him. She would have liked to sit with them and tell them it really wasn't that bad, that they'd get used to things after a few months. She'd have liked to tell them which students at the youth training facility were safe and which were listeners, or who the nice instructors of public enlightenment were, or how to sneak out after kerf and scavenge without getting caught. But she knew she couldn't take the chance. It was so hard to know whom to trust that it was easier not to trust anyone. Marina continued down the aisle. To her right, the JJ girls, Jennifer, Heather, and Michelle, stopped comparing the latest jewelry they'd scrounged and looked up. Marina turned her back to Jennifer's whispered insults and walked past her. Behind Jennifer, Frankie Pug-Faced Poyer stuck his ugly pus into the aisle. Marina pushed by and smiled at Dex, who was in the back row, saving her a seat. Dex had been a part of her relocation group after they'd been culled from their homes and assigned to the Spring Valley Redap community. Marina flopped beside Dex, barely keeping the required foot of distance between them. They touched hands quickly. "Hey," Dex whispered, ignoring the no-talking rule. Like ventriloquists, he and almost everyone at the YTF had learned to talk while barely moving their lips. "Hey," Marina whispered back, staring at the ceiling. "What's up?" "Nothing, just my dad being a jerk again." The bus pulled away from the compound and gathered speed, skimming silently along what had once been country roads winding through the lush farmland of Spring Valley. The farms were dead now, and the roads were flat black asphalt, cutting straight across the barren fields. Dex turned to Marina. "You get in okay last night?" "Yeah, what about you?" "Yeah." She wriggled out of her coat, leaning into Dex longer than she should have. He pressed back, and she knew he too was enjoying the stolen moment of closeness. "Wake me when we're there," he whispered. Marina smiled, wondering if he felt as safe as she did when they were together. She twisted around and looked out the back window, watching the vast tracts of ruined cropland spill out behind the bus. Whatever had once thrived in the rich soil of Spring Valley was long dead. Weeds wilted, dark from the coming cold, blanketed the wasteland, and a black frost glinted under the early morning sun. Marina squinted at the odd beauty of it, wondering why the sun would even choose to rise on such a place as this. She tried to count the shadowy lines of old furrows ghosted beneath the weeds, but they flickered by too fast. A tree overlooked somehow in the ravaging still stood in one field. Scattered around its trunk lay most of its leaves, blazing in autumn reds and crimson yellows. They looked almost fake, they were so beautiful, like someone had dumped out a box of paper cutouts. A few early flecks of snow flitted down. A faint image came to Marina, something she'd seen before. White. Something white. Just a glimpse, then gone. A snowman, she thought? No, it was moving. Clouds? She turned front, keeping an eye on the bus driver, and slid down in her seat. She snuck her hand into a hidden seam of her coat and eased out a small stapling of scrap paper she'd stolen from art class. Dex saw the paper and shook his head. He hadn't been sleeping at all. Marina tapped her eyebrow twice, signaling Dex to keep watch, and then she leaned over, as if to tie her shoe. She slid out the small stub of a pencil she'd hidden in the cuff of her pants, and staying low behind the seat back, started to write. But the image was no longer there. She looked out the window again. Sometimes she had to trick her memories into showing themselves. Cold shoulder them a little. It came again. The doorbell's ringing. It won't stop. Footsteps on the porch. My mother walking toward the front door. They're getting into the house. They have no faces. White heads masked. It's okay. It's okay. It's kids. It's just kids. There's laughter. My mother's laugh. The little kids are dressed in white. Dressed up like silly ghosts. Holes cut out for eyes. Goofy mouths drawn in magic marker. It's just kids. Marina laid her small binding of paper against her knee, pressed it flat, and wrote. I remember her arm above me holding open the screen door. Her dress, a tiny flower print, yellow and blue. I remember the smell of cold and the wind outside, the sound of dried leaves blowing. It was a holiday we used to have, where kids played dress-up. I had candy in my hand that I passed out to the children. Then they left, and my mother took me back inside to the living room. I knelt at the coffee table. It had a thick glass top and a different memory, an uninvited one that Marina knew well, cut in. Glass flashing white, bright blinding white, explosions, no sound, blood everywhere. She closed her eyes and tried to chase the images away. Still, she saw the blood. She focused on the first memory again. On her mother, the dress, the flower print. Keep writing, she told herself, trying to picture her mother's face. But all that she could see was her hair. She concentrated on her mother's hair. Beautiful hair, dark and long, pooling out on the glass top of our coffee table when she wrote. But on this day, the holiday, she wasn't writing. She was playing with me, cutting shapes out of a sheet of orange paper. I had my own scissors, too, blue-handled and blunted. Maria put the pencil down and let the memory wash over her. Her mother unwrapping a new package of construction paper, clear plastic, the glint and crackle of cellophane. White glue on their fingers. She could smell the glue. She could hear the hollow flip-flip of the thick sheets of colored paper as her mother fanned them in the air. She could even feel the soft crunch the scissors made as she cut out crooked silhouettes of cats and bats and... Hey, Dex said, tapping Marina. Put that away. We're here. The memory vanished at his touch. Marina hid her paper inside her coat and stuffed the pencil stub back into her cuff. She felt better. Recalling things that had happened made her feel good, like she'd accomplished something. It was one thing the ZTs couldn't get their hands on. They had tried to erase everything or twist it into something it wasn't, but they couldn't touch what she kept inside her. Whatever Marina could remember was hers. Everything of beauty, she thought, calling to her mother's words. Every memory of something good is a form of resistance. The bus idled in place within the gates of the YTF, waiting for the security sweep. A pair of black jackboots clacked by. A staff inspecting the underside of the bus with a mirror attached to the end of a long silver shaft. Marina pressed her forehead against the cold window and couldn't help thinking how, as a little girl, she'd heard of things like this happening to other people in other countries. She'd felt so safe then, so sorry for those poor people in all those faraway places. Do they feel sorry for us now? She wondered. Is there a faraway little girl somewhere thinking, those poor people? Or is she thinking, those people? Now they know. An electronic buzzer screeched the all-clear signal, and the bus eased through the security gate. Okay, take a moment, if you have not already, to jot down any new terms or new uses of words you know that you noticed in that chapter, and any rules in the society, and then you can go to Canvas and see what else you need to do for today.